For introducing the chief guest, may I invite Engineer Francis George, Joint Secretary of Trichure Management Association.
Thank you, Gio. Good evening, everyone. My name is Francis George. I am the Joint Secretary of TMA, Trichure Management Association. It's a pleasure to be introducing Dr. Rajesh today. He's a very knowledgeable person, very qualified. I met him for the first time at CJO's house. In fact, that was a couple of weeks back, a little more than a month. And talking to him, I was amazed at the depth of his knowledge. And then I suggested, CJO and I together, we suggested that he should engage, he should conduct a session for TMA. Dr. Rajesh was my sister Shaija's classmate at Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. As he mentioned earlier, he has done his high school in Trichure. He continued his studies in Trichure itself. After the 12th, he did engineering, civil engineering at Government Engineering College, Trichure. He was in fact classmates with one of our members, Sriranj of Vishram Builders. After that, he did his MBA from IIM Indore and PhD from IIM Ahmedabad. And now, of course, he's faculty with IIM Udaipur. He is on the board of directors of IIM Udaipur also. Now, a specialty of IIM Udaipur is that unlike some of the other IIMs and many of the other B schools, it's very much focused on research. So the faculty spends more time on research and guiding PhD students than teaching and the academics. Dr. Rajesh is also focused on research. He spends more time on research. I think he said 75% of the time on research and the rest on teaching. The specialization of Dr. Rajesh is consumer behavior. So he conducts training on this field for a lot of corporate companies. He is also involved with startups in advising them on the specifics of consumer behavior and also what are the marketing strategies to devise for the various products and services that the startups come out with. So according to the class of consumer being targeted, what should be the right fit for marketing strategy? So that's a specialty of Dr. Rajesh. Before joining IIM Udaipur, he has had a stint with Dabur India in marketing. And he also worked overseas as a consultant in consumer products, consumer and retail products. He worked in countries like US, Europe, and also India, of course. On the personal front, he's a football fan. He's a Manchester City fan, big time. That's it about Dr. Rajesh Nanarpura. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Francis George, for that nice introduction. And let's hear from the faculty, the resource person, Dr. Rajesh Nanarpura.
So thank you so much. This is just brilliant to be able to be with all of you, and I consider it a great pleasure and honor to be, called for this particular session. Thank you, Francis, for such a great introduction. I really liked it, and of course, Dr. Xavier and Gio and all of you, for being so warm and saying so many nice things. So I just wanted to kind of, share my screen because I have a short presentation. I don't know. I hope this is visible to everyone.
Yeah, it is visible.
Okay. So as Francis kind of said, I have spent a lot of time in Trichure. Spent for about 5 years of high school at Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, Puchatti, and then 4 years at Government Engineering College, Trichure. And therefore, I have very fond memories of Trichure. and it's a great pleasure to be here. I have a very short presentation because I wanted to keep it a little interactive. I wanted time basically for, in case you have anything to ask or anything to talk about or discuss or whatever. I thought that there should be some time for that. So I don't have a very long presentation on this particular subject. What I have seen in my, especially in my time at IIM Udaipur, as I interact with startups, as I interact with different companies, is sometimes I feel that there's a lack of understanding of what really marketing means. And somehow I feel that the power of marketing is not adequately used by many companies, just because there is a lack of understanding of how it can be used. There is sometimes, I have been asked, marketing, isn't it just advertising, or marketing, isn't it just selling, right? So with that kind of a background, I thought that it's important to address the topic of the elusive consumer, right, or the elusive customer here. And I thought, this is a great set of people to talk to about that, simply because many of you have your own businesses. Maybe there are students here who are aspiring entrepreneurs. Maybe many of you have already been part of businesses and so on. And this is the Thrissur Management Association. So I thought that it's important. This could be a topic that could be of relevance to the members of this association. So that's why I decided, when I was talking to Francis, that I said that maybe we could talk about this. So I would, kind of ask all of you to get into the shoes of being an entrepreneur or being an aspiring entrepreneur or being a business person as you go through this presentation. I think that will really help in terms of identifying with some of the things that I will talk about in this presentation. So I would just ask you to be in the shoes of that aspiring entrepreneur or that actual entrepreneur, right? So just as you listen to this, the way that I have kind of structured this presentation is to ask you some questions, right? Assuming that you have businesses to run, you're part of the management association, and this whole presentation is a set of questions that I have put, maybe 4 or 5 questions, which might be provocative if you think of it as a business owner. But I want you to think about those things, and maybe it will help you in terms of your own business, in terms of when you go back to your business. Maybe some of these questions you might want to think of answers for that for your own business, and which might help you to think a little bit more than maybe what you're thinking right now. So as long as that little light, that little questioning light is put in some of you at least, I think I would consider this presentation to be successful. So with that kind of a background, I'll just kind of start. I thought about this in terms of, how should I position this whole presentation, right? So the thought that I have is that many of us, either are part of this small and medium enterprises or are kind of, in touch with them. And I thought that it might be interesting to start off this presentation thinking about putting yourself in the shoe of somebody who kind of is part of a small and medium enterprise, right? So their importance is something that I don't think I have to discuss, but just to give you some perspective in terms of how SMEs kind of contribute to the economy. They are 45% of India's total industrial production. They make up almost 40% of exports, almost 38% contribution to our national GDP, and more than 60 million jobs. So it's a huge contributor in many different ways, right from micro enterprises to medium enterprises, right? So which could be, having close to 250 people employed and so on. But all of this kind of a gamut is covered in this. But when I'm looking at that, and when I went through some of the literature around small and medium enterprises, they are also facing their own challenges. And these challenges multiply as COVID takes its toll in terms of the business environment, right? So irrespective of COVID, there are certain challenges which are now getting multiplied with COVID. And as I was going through some of this, I was looking at what are the top 5 challenges, right, that SMEs face. It seems that inadequate access to credit is something that I keep hearing about, and I see as one of the top 5. There's an inability to kind of attract quality employees or talent. That is something that SMEs tend to, because of their size, because of their location sometimes, that you might not be able to get top quality talent. One of the top 5 seems to be a lack of innovation. That innovation is, there is sometimes a sense of stagnation as time goes along. So there's this lack of innovation, which seems to be a challenge. Technology and digital know-how seems to be another challenge. And the 5th one, which I saw, is a lack of marketing know-how. This was very interesting for me, right? It's not about execution of marketing know-how. It seems to be a lack of marketing know-how, right? So there is this feeling that maybe the use of marketing is not adequately being used in some of these SMEs. And this is what we will focus on today, right? So this area of lack of marketing know-how. So I'm just putting this in some sort of a perspective in terms of where this presentation is going. I have been asked many times, what is marketing, right? And of course, there are many different definitions of what marketing is. And I've always kind of, thought in terms of my understanding of marketing, in terms of its application, what is that something that will really encapsulate what marketing is? And I think of all the many definitions, and there are many definitions, of all those many definitions, I think one definition which really captures marketing in the way that I understand it, and I kind of explain to my students, is this, which is given by, Peter Drucker, who says that the aim of marketing is to make selling superfluous, right? So what he is saying basically is that if you do marketing very well, then the kind of effort that you need to sell your products becomes that much lesser, right? So the aim of marketing is to make selling superfluous. So you don't have to push your products too much just because you have done your marketing very well. And when that, what does that mean? I think it's a very important thing in terms of companies, in terms of startups, simply because, sometimes as I interact with many startups, with many of these, companies, there is this product focus. There is this inordinate amount of time being spent on improving features, improving the product. Always the focus is short-sighted and always on the product. And in this process, sometimes, for whom is this product? The customer gets lost, right? So what is being told in this very concise statement by Peter Drucker is to say that if you have a good understanding of your consumers' needs, if you have a good understanding of your customer needs and your product or what you are trying to make, you make it in a way that addresses those needs, then customers want that product. Customers pull that product towards them and your selling effort reduces. So it's between this whole market or this customer who is there and your product. Can you come up with that kind of a fit which makes it automatically sell, right? So he's saying if you do your marketing well, so the aim of marketing is to make sure that selling doesn't have to be concentrated too much on. And therefore it's a process. It's not a single thing, it's a process. Marketing is a process. Developing a marketing strategy is a process. And only through this process, if you're able to do this process well, then your effort on selling will reduce, right? So, and if you can, just remove selling itself, that means that you've been excellent at your marketing efforts. So I find this, in some ways, when we go back to marketing literature, this is also called a market orientation, right? So if you're oriented to your customer in terms of your product development, in terms of understanding what is your target market, and make products and services which serve that particular target market, and there is a particular need being addressed through your products and services, to a large extent, there is a pull for what you are selling, and the impact of selling or the effort required for selling kind of goes down, right? So this is what marketing, a good concise definition of marketing would be, and which I really like in terms of the way that I understand marketing as well. So the question that is always there is, and this is the first question that I want all of you as maybe entrepreneurs, maybe business owners, maybe aspiring business owners or aspiring entrepreneurs to think about, right? So if you're thinking about a business idea or you already have a business, what customer need are you satisfying, right? So this is a question that you need to ask yourself for your companies, for your ideas. What is the key customer need that you are satisfying? Because marketing to a large extent is about providing value, is about making sure that customer value is created. And if that has to be created, there is a need that is getting satisfied. So can you think back? Can you sit back and think about your products and services, what you are trying to sell or what you aspire to sell or what you aspire to build and maybe become an entrepreneur? What customer need are you satisfying, right? So I'm just putting some 2 or 3 different statements here in terms of putting this in context, right? So this is the first one, which says that Philip Kotler had this to say, which he said that within 5 years, if you are in the same business you are in now, you're going to be out of business, right? So when he says that the same business, he says nothing changes, right? What you are doing doesn't change, right? And you're just doing the same thing again and again. You know, most probably you'll be out of business in 5 years, right? So the key point that he's trying to talk about here is about the pace of change, about the external environment, right? So things are changing fast and you need to change as well, right? The other, similar kind of, statement which I just wanted to put here is what Andy Grove, and the ex-CEO of Intel, says, right? So he says only the paranoid survive. And what he's trying to say here is the fact that you have to constantly move, right? As a business, you have to constantly move. And you have to be paranoid about things changing, right? Because change is constant. And as a business owner, if you are not paranoid, most probably you are stagnating, right? So maybe he takes it to an extreme. But the key point that both Philip Kotler and Andy Grove are talking about here is the pace of change, right? And how is it relevant to the question that I'm asking you is to say that consumer needs themselves might be changing, right? So you might have started a business, that business might be doing well now or must have done well in the last 4 or 5 years, but you have to keep track of the customer needs. Are you still satisfying the needs that you have started with? Has the customer changed? Has the environment changed? Have trends changed? Because of which do you need to relook at the customer need that you are satisfying? Because there is no business that is successful unless it is satisfying a real customer need, right? And I think the third part which I want to talk about here is this concept of marketing myopia by Theodore Levitt, right? And it's very interesting. This is an article which came in 1960, and I think it is still as relevant today as it was in 1960, right? And he talks about how we define the need that we are satisfying. He says, what happened to railroads in the US? Why did they become obsolete? They became obsolete, according to him, because railroads thought that they were in the railroad business. And they did not understand that they were in the transportation business. So the customer need that they were satisfying was not that people wanted to go around in a railroad. The customer need that was getting satisfied was the need for transportation, for affordable transportation. And when new things came, when new ideas about transportation or new ways of transportation came, the existing methods of transportation started falling, and the railroad couldn't understand this, right? It is also, I like to think of, a typical example being the typewriter, right? So many typewriter companies failed simply because they thought that they were in the typewriter business, right? So, and they didn't understand that they were in the business of communication in terms of faster communication, right? So as the computers came in, as technology progressed, companies which thought that they were in the typewriter business failed, became obsolete. But companies which realized that they are in the communications business moved on to other things, maybe moved on to computers, maybe moved on to DTPs, maybe moved on to the printing business, right? So that is, this is an understanding of how to define customer needs. And this is a question that you need to ask yourself. If you have a company or if you are thinking of an entrepreneurship, what is that customer need that you are satisfying? I read recently actually a LinkedIn post where somebody talked about this, right? So they were talking about, a board meeting happening at Southwest Airlines, right? So Southwest is a low-cost carrier, right? It's a low-cost air carrier. And they were talking about a board meeting where they said that one of their so-called competitors, right? So another low-cost carrier had raised their prices, right? And Southwest was, of course, lower than that particular carrier. And what the board was telling the CEO was to say, let us also increase our prices. We will keep the difference the same. But since they have increased, we have room to increase as well. Let us increase a little bit. We will keep the difference the same. The CEO said that you don't understand this business then, because I am not competing against that low-cost carrier. I am competing against the road transport, right? So I am a low-cost carrier. I'm not in the airline business. I am in the business of transportation or low-cost transportation. And therefore, my competition is road and not this other airline. So that, again, very beautifully encapsulates this idea that Theodore Levitt talks about, which is the idea of marketing myopia, that sometimes we are very myopic in terms of defining the customer need or where we are situated as companies, right? So this is a question, again, which I'm asking you when you go back after this presentation, when you think through your own company, can you think about what is that customer need that you are satisfying, right? And therefore, this could be another example of this could be to say that if PepsiCo thinks that they are in the cola business, then their competition is Coca-Cola. But if they think that they are in the thirst quenching business, then it could be juices, it could be other kind of drinks, right? So as long as if trends are such, if macro trends are such that everybody is moving away from cola, there's no point in thinking that I am still doing better than Coke in cola. Pepsi has to do something about how they are satisfying this core customer need, which we are talking about, which is to quench your thirst, right? So this is a question that you can ask yourself and say, where are you with this? Where are you situating yourself as a company, right? So this is the first question, and I will try and connect these questions, hopefully, and you will see those connections. The other interesting, so if this is the customer need and you have certain customers, I think it is, as I was also talking about earlier, marketing is about providing value, right? So when you say providing value, an important question to be asked is, how do customers perceive value, right? Because you might be thinking you're giving a lot of value, but how are your customers perceiving that value? And it's a very, in marketing, the understanding of customer perceived value is very simple, which is to say that it is really the difference between total customer benefit and total customer cost, right? So this is the difference of customer perceived value, that customers kind of in their head, maybe subconsciously, maybe unconsciously, put some benefits to your offering and put some cost to your offering. And as long as that is positive, they see something, they perceive some value, right? So again, I'm reminded of a company, of a startup which I was interacting with, which was in the area of software, creating software solutions, right? And they were a startup, and they had kind of made their product, and they were trying to sell it out in the market. And they said that our features are the best in this area, right? So we are giving features which nobody else is giving, right? And we are matching the price of everyone else. It's not like we are charging a lot as compared to our competitors. But when I go into the market, I'm still not doing as well as I should be. Customers are not buying. So the question that was asked to me was, how much should I reduce the price? Right? So what that means is the particular entrepreneur is thinking that the cost that the customer is seeing is the price of the product, right? And therefore, the entrepreneur is saying, if I want to reduce the customer cost, I need to reduce my price, right? But the question is, it's not only price, right? So from the entrepreneur's view, the benefit are all these great features that they're giving, and the cost is the price. So as long as I reduce the price, of course, more customers should buy it, right? But that was a fundamental misreading of the situation, in the sense that total customer cost is rarely ever the price that customers pay. A person who is running a small and medium enterprise, when another, a new software vendor comes and says that, of course, I have these features which are really useful, the reason why that entrepreneur is, reason why that small business owner is talking to the entrepreneur is because he likes those new features. Otherwise, he wouldn't even waste his time. Of course, he likes those features and they are useful, but he has a lot of costs in his head. The first cost could be, this is a new company. How long will they be there, right? So that's a cost in his head. The second is, it needs to be, my people need to be trained on this new software. Everything needs to be changed. That again is a big cost in his head, right? So there is a way of doing business right now. Maybe that will get disrupted because a new software is coming in, right? So that again is a cost in his head. So there are multiple such, and he's like, a couple of them asked about support, for example. Will you support me if I have a problem? So that is another cost in their head. And they do not trust an entrepreneur, a new startup who might be fly by night, who might go tomorrow, that if I change everything in my business because of this, and I don't get the proper support, I don't get enough training for my employees, maybe tomorrow my employees might revolt against me, because anyway, I am not the greatest guy with respect to understanding technology. It's my employees, right? If they don't like this change, they might revolt against me. But maybe the question that the small business owner is asking the entrepreneur is, your price is too high. Maybe that is what he's telling you, but it doesn't mean that that is the reason why he's not buying. The reason why he's not buying is many of these other costs that are there in his head. And as an entrepreneur, can you reduce those costs, right? So can you say that, training will be free for the first 2 years, right? Can you say that my upfront cost is so much, but maybe I have an installment scheme? I am reducing each of those costs in the customer's mind, and therefore increasing the perceived value that the customer sees in your offering, right? So to a large extent, this is another question that you need to ask yourself. How is the customer perceiving value in your products and services, right? And can you see both sides of the equation? Can you see what could be the potential benefits that you're giving? And can you see what are the potential costs that the customer is thinking about every time he thinks about your product? Maybe there is some friction in buying your product. Can you ease that friction? Because that's a cost. Can you ease that friction? Maybe that buying process itself is too long. Maybe the support, the after-sale support is the problem. But there could be multiple things when you talk to customers which you need to understand. And therefore, the question of how do I increase customer perceived value is to say, can I keep increasing the customer benefits in terms of what the customer is perceiving it? And at the same time, can I reduce the customer costs, the perceived customer costs, right? And this is another question maybe which you can ask yourself. And with respect to your companies and with respect to the products and services that you are selling, to kind of say, how are customers perceiving value for my products? And can I increase that value? And that value increase can be in two ways. Can I maybe change some of the costs that they are thinking psychologically in their head into benefits? Can I increase the features, etc.? So typically entrepreneurs say, I will increase features. My product will have more features than competitor. Right? But maybe customers don't even care about many of those features, right? So you have to be very clear in terms of customer perception of value. What are the points on which customers are perceiving value in terms of the costs and benefits? So again, another question for all of you as you keep going back, in terms of how your customers are perceiving value for your offerings. Going from that, so if you say customers are perceiving value, it's important to increase customer perceived value. The question is, who is this customer, right? So that is the next question. Many times I see that as companies start, as I said, one of the key things is that there is too much of a product focus where I'm always worried about making my product better. Like it's that classic thing of creating a better mousetrap, right? Without really understanding what do customers want, right? And one of the key problems with that is, since you're so product focused, you have very little idea of who is buying your product. You have very little idea of who is your customer, right? So I'll just digress a little bit because this is very interesting for us in terms of understanding customers, right? As I said, as Francis kind of noted in terms of what I do is this idea of customer behavior or consumer behavior, as we call it, right? So it is also important that, as we look at certain concepts that might come from the West, it is also important that, there is a lot of consumer behavior to a large extent is because of culture, because of unique context that India has, each state has, each region has, right? So there is a great need to understand the Indian consumer, which is not adequate, which has not been done adequately till now, because many of the theories, many of what we understand, many of the much of the understanding of management comes from the West, right? And therefore, this understanding of who is our customer, right? So I just want to digress a little bit, because as part of that, we are doing something. We have created what is called as a consumer culture lab at IIM Udaipur, along with a couple of, there's somebody from NUS Singapore. There's a couple of colleagues from IIM Udaipur. Together, we have this consumer culture lab where we are doing research in understanding the Indian consumer, right? So we are collaborating, and of course, there is a great interest in the Indian consumer now. So there's a lot of people willing to collaborate with us, because in terms of trying to do projects here and so on. But I'm saying there is a need to understand the Indian consumer in terms of us doing that research, in terms of, because that has not adequately been done, right? So if, for example, we are doing a few projects right now. One of them is to, just when I'm talking about a local project, I'm looking at how food bloggers have changed consumption habits in terms of restaurant discovery in Kerala, right? So that's one part of this whole big project that we're doing on social influencers in general, right? So one part of that is to see, for example, rural farmers who have gone on to YouTube and so on in Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, etc., how they are changing farming practices. And the other, which I thought was interesting, is how food bloggers are changing restaurant discovery in Kerala, for example, right? So when I go home nowadays, or when I'm with my cousins or with my friends, and I keep hearing about, this particular restaurant that this food blogger has talked about, which was never the case earlier, right? So consumer preferences, consumer behavior is changing because of certain intermediaries in the market. And our research is kind of looking, as part of the consumer culture lab, we are looking at that, right? So we are doing a lot of work in terms of academic research in this area. But the question that I'm asking you is this: who is your customer, right? So that in a broad area is where, this particular, initiative that we have started is working on. I'll just move on, because I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, because I consider it to be very interesting and unique in terms of what we are doing in India. But the other question that I want to come back to you is, this idea of, as a business owner, who is your customer, right? So do you have an idea about this customer? Is it this person in a rural area in the north? When you think of your customer, and you might have hundreds of customers if you're in B2C, right? And you might have very few customers if you're in B2B, irrespective of that, right? So is there a persona in your head? Do you understand who you are selling this to? When you make a marketing intervention, do you understand who this will impact, right? In your mind, do you have a persona of a customer, right? So this is another question that you might want to ask yourself at some stage. Like, maybe I understood this when I started my business. Maybe I don't understand it very well, even though I'm going to start my business, but who is this customer, right? So we talked about customer perceived value, but customer perceived value by whom, right? So do you have this picture in your mind? Does it come to you when I say my customer? Does a picture come into your head, right? Which in some way is a persona of who you are trying to sell your products to. And therefore, whatever you do in terms of marketing intervention, which could be designing the product itself, or pricing the product, or making it available at different places, or promoting the product in terms of some marketing communication, for whom? Or is it that you give it to some department, they do something and something comes out of it, and you have no idea whether that was the best thing that would have come out of it? Because as owners, as business owners, do you have an understanding of this target customer, of this customer for whom you are selling, or for whom you have to create or increase customer perceived value? Do you have an understanding, right? So it's a question that you have to, if you are in a product category, you to a large extent have to have an idea. Something has to come into your mind when you think of the customer. A persona has to come up in your mind. And in some way, that is your target segment, right? So you have to be clear in terms of what is that target segment to which I'm trying to sell my products. Does it come for each of your products? If you have many different product lines, do you have an idea for each of these product lines, who is your target customer? Or maybe you have one big product line. Do you have an understanding? You should have that understanding, right? Your people should have that understanding. At least the marketing department should have that understanding, because these things make changes in terms of what you can get out of your marketing efforts. Because sometimes what happens in many small and medium enterprises is that marketing is just given to a few people, and whatever they do, oh, that's just, they would have sent something, they would have sent a flyer, they would have made some digital campaign, they would have done this, but with very little strategic understanding of what marketing does, right? So that is the question that is there. Who is your customer? And just before going, talking about this, I just wanted to talk about a couple of stories, right? So the first one is, of course, during my time at Dabur, right? So I used to look after this brand called Dabur Chyawanprash at that point in time. I wasn't, for the limited time that I was there in Dabur, I was a brand manager for that. And I remember that as a marketing group, sometimes we used to, sit and listen to ad agency presentations, right? So, and ad agencies would come and they would present the ad campaign. So sometimes, say for some other product also, we would sit and give our own perspectives in terms of whether we like the ads, whether we like the campaign, and so on, right? So I remember there was this ad campaign which was being done for this brand at that time in Dabur called Dabur Amla, right? So, and I was sitting on that, though I was not looking after Dabur Amla, I was looking after Dabur Chyawanprash. But anyway, I was sitting there and I was kind of listening and seeing their ad campaign. And, our head of marketing at that point in time, when it was all over, he asked everyone their points of view in terms of what they thought about the marketing campaign. And I didn't like it one bit, right? So I kind of said that I thought, the aesthetics were extremely wrong. I thought it's not very nice. I thought, the message was not clear. I couldn't really understand what was being said in that ad. That there was a call for action. I really didn't get it, right? So I didn't think it appealed to me. And what the marketing head said at that point in time showed how little I understood about marketing at that point in time, right? So he said, this particular product is not for you. You belong to a strata which is very different, right? So this is for that person in maybe a tier 2, tier 3 town in North India, right? Who has been using maybe this kind of an oil for a long time. So are you getting into the shoes of that target customer before you are evaluating this ad, or are you telling me what you think? Because what you think is not important, right? Because you are not the target customer. It doesn't matter whether you will buy or you won't buy, because this ad is not for you. It is for the target customers of this brand. So can you get into their shoes and tell me whether this ad is good or not? Then there is some merit to what you are saying. But if you're saying you don't like it, it doesn't matter to me, because this is not for you, right? So that was a great learning in terms of understanding this idea of a target customer. Do you have that in mind? Or, when you evaluate an ad, you say, oh, look at that music, it's horrible, look at this, but you have no idea for whom that ad is. And sometimes brand managers don't have an idea for who that ad is. And that's even more difficult, right? But all I'm saying is this idea of who is your customer is very important, because all your marketing interventions then become more and more important when you understand who is your customer. The other story which I wanted to say, because as Francis said, I spent some time in Europe, I spent some time in North America, at that time with this company called Cognizant, right? So I was in their business consulting in retail and consumer goods, right? So I was leading a particular project in North America. And I remember this customer, right? So customer head at that point in time coming over to our room and saying, let's call this person Arun. So she came and she said, can we meet Arun? And I said, okay, who's Arun? I was not very sure. I looked around and I realized that Arun is a developer, right? So Arun came and, and this lady who was the head of, in terms of their marketing and so on, she came and said, we want to reward Arun because Arun has done a great job. We had this particular report that we have been running for so long, and we raised a issue with that, and Arun has done something in that which kind of reduces the effort that we had so far by almost half. And it's so user intuitive now, right? So this was this thing, and they came and they gave something to Arun. They gave a little gift to him, and they all clapped, and they made a big deal out of what Arun had done, right? And when they went back, Arun is standing flabbergasted, right? So I went and asked Arun, so Arun, how, I mean, that's great. So you did this. And he's saying, I cannot understand what has happened. So I asked, what can't you understand? He said, there have been so many different projects on which I have worked for the same customer. I have spent endless nights sometimes on certain such difficult technical problems, solving them, right? And nobody has ever come and said anything like this to me. This particular thing is 2 lines of code, right? It took me 5 minutes to change the 2 lines of code. And for that, I am being celebrated as if I've done the greatest thing in the world, right? So that is how Arun is looking at this, because Arun is product focused. Right? So the only thing that he is seeing is the work on the product in terms of improving the features, but he has no idea how that is impacting the customer. And sometimes the simplest solutions impact the customer the maximum in a positive way. And that, to a large extent, you know, the reaction from Arun is simply because he doesn't understand the customer and the customer's needs very well. Right? So this is another question, which I'm saying you could maybe think about when you go back. Do you understand your customer, right? So, or this idea of the target segment. So just to finish that, you know, startups come and say, you know, I could sell to anybody. You know, my product is such that everybody is my user, right? So there's usually a big potential market in front of you, right? But if you understand that potential market well, if you study it very well, you will see that there are segments in that. And of course, maybe I'm simplifying it and there is a process to all of that, but conceptually, there are segments of that potential market which are homogeneous, but maybe very heterogeneous among each other, right? So there are these segments, and one segment could be this, you know, maybe you are a tire company and there is this segment of farmers in rural Uttar Pradesh who use tractors, right? And that's a segment that is not tapped enough. And you are maybe in the tire retreading business or in the tire business or whatever it is. And this is a segment which is lucrative, which is big enough, and maybe this is enough to sustain you. But that understanding, right? So all your marketing effort should be to make sure that this person, who in my mind is my target segment, right, is getting maximum customer perceived value out of what I am giving. But for that, you have to, as I said, customer perceived value is an interesting concept, but the corollary to that is that you should know for whom the customer perceived value is there. Who is that customer? And it is very, very important that you understand, therefore, who is your target customer. Or that target segment could be, you know, maybe the stay-at-home housewife at Alapura, right? So you should have this persona. Who is your customer? And this could be different for different product lines that you might have. But do you understand it very well enough is a question that you can ask yourself, right? When you go back. And if you do not understand, do something to understand it, right? And as I said, you know, when I say the elusive customer, what I'm trying to say is that this is not a one-time job that I do it today and then I never have to do it in my business. This has to be done at reasonable intervals of time because customers change, trends change, customer needs change, and you have to be paranoid about this to succeed. There is no God-given right for any business to keep on succeeding all the time, right? It only depends on how well you are thinking about your customers, right? And therefore, it is very important to understand your target segment, because once you do that, you can do, you are now like a horse with your blinkers on. Everything that you do is only for this particular, because you understand your target customer, right? So you don't get distracted with other things. You don't get distracted like me telling, oh, your advertisement is horrible, but you know, I am not your target segment. It doesn't matter what I think of your ad, right? So that understanding is critical, right? And therefore the question, maybe the last question that I want to ask is, what is your marketing strategy? Do you have an idea of what is your marketing strategy, right? And marketing strategy has, you know, is talked about in many different ways, but in a nutshell, the marketing strategy is just 2 things, right? Do you know who is your target segment? And do you know how you are positioning yourself to that target segment, right? So do you know that if your target segment is the stay-at-home housewife at Alapura, and your product is maybe, you know, educational solutions for her children, how are you positioning yourself as compared to your competitors who are also trying to reach the same person, right? Are you creating a distinct image about your company in that person's mind? Are you doing, and how does this positioning happen? This positioning happens based on your product features, right? It's not enough to shout from the rooftop saying that, this is my positioning. That makes no sense. But you have to do it in the marketplace. And how do you do it in the marketplace? It really depends on what your product is. What are your product features? It depends on what your price is. It depends on where you are available. It depends on every little bit of communication that you are sending out, every flyer that you send out, every digital marketing campaign that you do, every radio jingle that you do, every billboard that you put up. Everything is positioning your product in some way, right? So is there a clear marketing strategy? Do you understand your target segment? Do you understand your positioning to that target segment? This is another question which I want you to take back and say that, do I have a clear marketing strategy, right? And if not, can I work on that? Can I make sure that I have a marketing strategy, which is just to say that, do I know my target segment? Is my positioning clear as compared to my competition for that particular target segment, right? So with that, I think these were some 4 or 5 questions which I want you to maybe think about. Try and apply it to your own companies if that is the case, or if you're aspiring to start something, or you're helping somebody do their own businesses and so on, but you're part of the Trishul Management Association. I thought therefore you would be interested from a business perspective, right? So these were the 3 or 4 questions which I wanted to put to all of you. And therefore the last one, right? So this is the final one, which is to say that, do you have a marketing mindset as the leader of the organization, as the person who's running the show? Do you have a marketing mindset, right? Or do you think that marketing is advertising? Do you think that marketing can be done by these 3 or 4 people who I have hired who keep sending these digital campaigns out? Do you have a marketing mindset? Do your employees have a marketing mindset? Because the idea is to say that once you have that marketing mindset, to a large extent, your sales efforts reduce, because you are doing upfront much of the work that otherwise the salesperson is trying to do through giving discounts and trying to push that product and so on, right? So do you have that marketing mindset? Can you develop that in your organization if you are the leader there, because you are in charge of that organization? And therefore this marketing mindset has to come from you to everyone else, right? So how you set the ball rolling, the example that you set in terms of the customer's needs, and having a marketing strategy in terms of customer perceived value, in terms of some of these things that we have talked about, right? Do you have that? Can you ingrain that in the organization? Can you have your employees doing that? This is a question, that the final question that I'm asking, and maybe you can think about it when you go back. Right, so these are some of the, this really is in a nutshell my presentation. I just wanted to stop, as I started with Peter Drucker's this thing. I wanted to stop as well with that, where he says that the business enterprise has 2 and only 2 basic functions, right? Marketing and innovation. You have to continuously innovate, right? Without that, marketing doesn't help. And it's not enough to just innovate, because you need to do the marketing as well. Right? And marketing is a very less understood term. So hopefully I have tried to convey the way that I understand marketing, right? And you of course could have your own understandings of marketing, but the way I understand marketing is what I have talked about. So as he continues to say, he says marketing and innovation produce results, all the rest are costs, right? So he says that there are only 2 basic functions that any organization has, and that is being innovative and being, and marketing. These are the 2 revenue producing things for you. So I think that's it. Yeah, thanks so much for your time in this very difficult times. Thank you so much for taking some time out. And I really appreciate that you gave me the time to kind of talk to you. And maybe if there are any questions, I don't know how you would like to do that. Maybe Francis can help, but yeah, I'm fine with if there's any need for, if you think you have any questions or want to discuss something.
Thank you, Dr. Rajesh Nanarkar for that wonderful presentation. And over to the President for the comments.
Dr. Rajesh Nanarkar, it was an excellent presentation. You made the subject marketing so simple to the people who are attending this. We have talked about marketing myopia, market segmentation, market targeting, market positioning, everything. It's very important as far as a manufacturer or a marketer is concerned. Of course, once they understand what the customer needs or what are the expectations of the customer, of course, that is the success. Anyway, we have opened the eyes and the ears of all the people or the entrepreneurs who are sitting in this club, and I'm really sure that this will help them to improve their business. Thank you. Very excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the kind words.
Thank you. Now the platform is open for interactions.
Yes, Mr. Rajesh. Hello, can you hear me, Mr. Rajesh?
Yes.
See, I am an alumni of your college, DEC, long time back. So let me have the privilege of sharing my doubt with you. That's
Sure.
Initially, you had projected Philip Kotler. After all, he's a marketing guru. He's known. He has written so many books and all those things I know. You have projected in 5 years' time, if you don't think of change in a business, you will be out of business. It is very difficult for me to digest, especially in MSMEs. 5 years is too less a time. There will be hardly any MSME which gets established. At least for 10 years they take, or even more. Of course, after 15, 20, 25 years, one has to think of a change, diversify and whatnot. But in 5 years' time, at least in India, I doubt whether any MSME has thrived to that extent that you have to think of a change. So I don't know how you can, if you can clarify that point, I'll be grateful.
Yeah. So I think the import of that statement really is to say that if you're doing what you have been doing, and just because you were successful when you started off, and you think that you will be successful continuously because, of course, customers bought from you when you started off, right? So the question is not change in business. I don't think what Philip Kotler is talking about is to say that there are wholesale changes that you make every 5 years or anything like that. What he's saying is that customers are constantly changing. Customer trends are constantly changing. The macro environment is constantly changing. And therefore, you have to keep making those slight tweaks into your business all the time, keeping in mind what is happening. And when you look back, you will see that you're still successful after 5 years because those tweaks which you have made all the time, those could have been very small tweaks, right? Because you're constantly recalibrating your business based on changing customer needs, right? The idea is not to say that, every 5 years you have to do something radically different, but it is only to say that just because something is successful today, you cannot keep on repeating that same thing for 5 years without making any change. Most probably you will become obsolete. Your competitors will take over, or customers will find something else, because the way that they are, see, the question is always what need are you satisfying? And if customers find better ways for that need to get satisfied, that might change. So that I think is the way that particular quote needs to be read.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. And there are a couple of queries from the students from B schools in and around Trachur.
Sure.
That first one is from Elijah Business School, Mr. Ebin. How to effectively maintain a good relationship with an elusive customer?
Yeah, so I think the question here is, the reason why I use the term elusive, but didn't really talk about the elusive customer, specifically about that is to the point that I'm trying to make is that customers are constantly changing in terms of their habits, right? And therefore, they are not like, okay, I nailed this down today and nothing will change now as I keep going along. That's not the idea, right? So the customers are always looking out. They are looking for other options. They are looking for maximizing their perceived value, right? For the particular need that you have this product for, right? And therefore, to make that relationship, see, the idea is to say that customers usually have a journey when they are buying even a product from from you, right? And that journey starts from maybe information search, goes on till post-purchase evaluation, right? So there's this journey which is there. It's not like, I decide one fine day I'm going to buy from this person. There is a journey. At each stage of that journey, are you making things easier for them? Are you making sure that the value that they are seeing of your product is higher than for your competition? Are you reducing the costs in their mind? Are you increasing the benefits in their mind? And therefore, this customer is elusive. This customer is not, does not have, there is nothing which says that this customer has to keep buying from you. That is something that we have to understand, that customer, if he or she is buying from you, it's a privilege for you, right? But this customer is elusive. And this customer will keep changing, and their needs will change, the environment will change. How can you make sure that this relationship is maintained with them? Because you have to keep track of these changes, and you have to keep refining your marketing strategy all the time, right? And therefore, through that is how you will maintain these relationships. I don't know whether I answered that question very well, but the elusive customer, even though I put it in the title, I have kept it in the background of what I have been talking about, right? So I hope that is understood.
Yeah, and next is another student from B school, Elijah B school, that is satisfaction fully or partially mediate the relationship between service quality and behavioral intentions.
Sorry, Gio, can you come again?
Sure. Does the satisfaction fully or partially mediate the relationship between service quality and behavioral intentions?
So I think these are, difficult questions to kind of generalize about, right? So there could be multiple mediating factors. There could be moderators within that. There could be antecedents to service quality itself, and maybe the construct of customer satisfaction itself is, has multiple, parts to it. It's not a simple construct, right? So these are, there is a lot of research in terms of service quality and customer dissatisfaction or satisfaction, right? So it would be neither right or easy for me to kind of say that this mediates and that, because it really depends sometimes on the context in terms of the research that you're using. It really depends sometimes on certain variables that you omit in your research, certain variables that you include in your research. So I think I would advise you, if you're interested in that, to start looking at that literature to understand where it stands right now.
Yeah. What is the best strategy according to you to attain profit from the elusive customer? That is from Mr. Divine Davis.
Yeah, so I think, customers, to a large extent, the way we understand customers is that customers are fine with companies making profits, right? But as long as it seems fair to them, right? So there is a particular profit, and it seems to be okay. We are seeing some of it today, right? So when we are kind of saying about the vaccines, customers to a large extent understand that, okay, but then they have this issue that maybe, oh my God, they seem to be making too much profit, right? So elusive customers or any customers from that perspective, making profit from them is about, that's what I'm saying. It's about customer perceived value. That is what you have to understand. And price is just a part of that equation, right? So as long as the value that you're giving is high, as long as customers perceive that, even that higher price is usually not a problem, right? So why do I go into a Starbucks and buy a coffee for maybe 200 or 250 rupees? Because I see some value there. Otherwise, why would I waste that money, right? So there is a customer perceived value in terms of certain benefits that I see of sitting in a Starbucks, of maybe being in that ambience, and that price is, a cost which is a large part of that. Much higher than that is the benefit that I'm getting out of it. Otherwise, why would I waste my money there, right? So the profit, I don't think, is an issue. What you need to look at is customer perceived value. And sometimes we think too much about the price. We think too much about, what price let me just reduce prices and most people will buy. No, not necessary. Even if you reduce prices, maybe that customer perceived value equation is not right in terms of what you are giving. And I think that is what has to be the focus.
Yeah, thank you. We would entertain some direct questions from the participants.
Question here. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were talking about the perceived value. So my question is does this brand ambassadors really have an effect on the we have seen that even a 10 rupee pen is being promoted by Sachin, or Agarbatti is being promoted by Amitabh Bachchan and all that. Actually, it is a direct hit on the small time players, who can't afford all such things. But maybe the value of the smaller industries, the product that they're making is much higher than this, but it is almost unseen. And that is the case with all SME sector. The bigger players actually overshadow them with all the brand ambassadors and all. How can we actually overcome that in some way?
Yeah, so I think the answer to that, again, I would go back to this idea of customer perceived value, right? Across the value chain, not just customers. Say, for example, if you are selling it to retailers, why would the retailer stock it, right? And if what should be the reason for the retailer to stock it? Why should the customer buy this particular thing? Like the classic example of this is maybe what we learn in management schools about the fight between Nirma and Unilever, right? So Unilever had everything going for it. They had all the money in the world. They had all the brand ambassadors that they could buy. But there was this upstart company called Nirma, which just because of the value proposition that it was offering and the kind of quality that it was able to give at that point in time, that at some stage they became the largest player in detergent, right? They overtook Unilever, right? So, and that's just an SME which went on to become a huge company, right? So there's a person who is kind of going around on his bicycle and selling this detergent, and slowly but surely he's making a place for himself in customers' minds, right? So it is not necessary always that a brand ambassador is required or something like that is the only way to kind of position yourself in the right way in the consumer's mind. It all comes back to how you are positioned. Are you positioned as the hardworking brand? Maybe I like that, right? But are you doing everything as a marketing intervention, which is propagating this idea of being the hardworking brand? Another example is in the US would be this fight between, say, Hertz and Avis, right? So Avis was always in second place, but they said we are second, but we try harder, right? So that is their positioning. They are not saying we are bigger than Hertz, but that was a great positioning because customers wanted to help them. They wanted to give that benefit of doubt to the second player, this underdog who's trying to kind of do well in this particular space. So of course, there is a use for brand ambassadors, there is a use for celebrity endorsements and so on. But I would be very hesitant to say that is the only way in which customer perceived value is created.
Yeah, thank you. We move on to the last query. This is from Mr. Sony Matthew. When the customers are inundated with the products and channels, how can we add meaning to a customer lifetime value?
Sorry, yeah, so I'll just try and understand that a bit better, Gio, if you could say that again.
Yeah. When the customers are inundated with the products and channels, how can we add meaning to customer lifetime value?
Okay. Yeah, so the idea of customer lifetime value is just in some way it's like it's a financial concept, right? To kind of over a lifetime, what is the net present value of all that the customer will buy from you, right? So that idea is to kind of bring it down in terms of discounting and to say that this is the net present value of what the customer will buy in their lifetime from you, and therefore the importance of loyalty to some extent, right? So if you have loyal customers who like your brand so much that every time you come up with a new project maybe, or you come up with a new line of products, customers believe in you. They believe in you, and your brand stands for something. It stands for quality. It stands for value for money. It stands for all of these things. So this loyalty is built into customers. This loyalty being built is the key reason for customer lifetime value being high, because of course customer acquisition is a very expensive thing, right? So every time customers leave you and you have to acquire a new customer, there is a cost to it. But if customers don't leave you, just because you have this proposition that is clearly understood by customers and they believe you, they know that when you make a mistake, you own up. When you say something, you mean it, right? Those are the things that will create customer lifetime value, right? So, it's a long process. If I just do it for today, I have this project or I have this product line which needs to sell. I don't care what happens tomorrow. That customer lifetime value is a question mark, and therefore you're always trying to acquire new customers, you're losing customers, you're acquiring customers, and that's very expensive. right? So I think that could be one way in terms of trying to understand the idea of customer lifetime value.
Thank you, sir. With that, I think there are no more queries.
Can I ask a question if there is time? Only if there is time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rajesh. It's quite insightful.
Sure.
One question, yeah, you did mention that customer perceived value is one makes the choice. But when it comes to Patanjali, suddenly customers just left the cost part of it, went for the indigenous emotion. Can you throw some light on it? So there, it was not bothered about perceived value. It just meant it is an Indian story.
No, I would beg to differ on that, to say that, it's still an idea of customer perceived value, that they are seeing certain benefits there. Maybe that benefit is being nationalistic. Maybe it is about bringing tradition back. Maybe it is, fighting against multinationals. But whenever I buy a Patanjali, maybe those customers thought that those are the benefits that they are getting. They are part of this fight, right? So, of course, this could be unconscious. This could be subconscious in some way that they are doing this, right? But again, much of what we do is not rational, right? So even though as economists and as marketers, there was this idea that customers are extremely rational and they try to keep increasing the utility function, that is rarely true, right? So much of what we do is quite irrational. And that irrational part sometimes builds on these things which are not tangible, which are intangible in their mind. But I would still try and put that into that equation, because there are certain benefits that they're seeing from buying Patanjali. Maybe they feel better about themselves. Maybe their identities become stronger because they're helping the nation, whatever. I'm not saying that I don't know enough about that, but I'm saying there are certain benefits beyond just the product attributes that they are looking at. And in some way, they're saying maybe they're part of the bigger fight or the nicer fight or something against the multinationals or whatever it is. And they think they're being part of that. They're doing something for the country by buying Patanjali. At least to a large extent, that was true earlier. I don't know whether that's true anymore. But to a large extent, Patanjali grew on this idea of nationalism, right? So it's about the multinationals have always exploited us, and that needs to stop. And that was their advertising to a large extent, right? Colgate did this and Colgate did that, and we need a nationalistic response to it. And so some of that, maybe the customers bought that, and those were the benefits that they were getting. They were part of that fight as well.
Thank you.
Gio, sir. Gio?
You're on mute, Gio. You're on mute.
Yeah. Thank you. With that, we are making an end to the QA session.